Hello, today we'll be discussing about bias piping and how do you cut a bias piping. First, I'll show you that and how we are going to use it. That will come later on. So now to cut a true bias, which stretches the max, you can start from the edge of the fabric. This is your salvage side and this is your cut edge. In order to make a square, you can start measuring. It depends upon how long you want the bias piping. If you wanted to put it around a blanket, then you really have to start much more further on from the corner. But if you're doing a small, just like a neckline or a very small, edge of a sleeve or something like that, you can start much more narrower. So right now, because we are going to make a small sample, I'm just going to do 9 inches. So 9 inches from here, 9 inches from this corner. And then I'm just going to do a diagonal line, joining both the points. Once you have this line is basically, if you actually see it, this is 45-degree angle. So 45-degree angle has got the maximum strength and it stretches really good when you're putting it, especially on a curve. So you have to decide whatever the width of the bias piping you want. Right now, I'm just going to do 1 inch piping because we're going to make a very small sample. So we are going 1 inches. I have a transparent ruler. If in case you don't have it, you can always measure it like this. See, this is your first line. You can go like this and just put your 2-3 lines like this, okay? And then you can draw your straight line. Always have at least 3 points to make a straight line. Once you have this, I'm going to cut one more because I'm going to put it on 2 edges. So we are going to go one more time. Again, the same measurement, 1 inch. So I've cut 2 strips. And you can cut them now. Now, when you have a bias, generally you get bias rolls like that in the market also. You can prepare one for yourself. You don't have to go so big, but you can save it for the future, like how this white one is there. Now, what happens when you have 2 pieces like that, you can join them and so that your bias goes continuously, the bias piping around wherever, whatever project you're doing. So this is called a seam that they have, and the seam is diagonal. So how do we get this diagonal seam? Whenever you are sewing a bias, we never go with a straight seam. It's always diagonally sewn. So how do you do it? Okay, so this is my wrong side. Why it's wrong side? Because I have drawn my blue mark, my tailor chalk, you can see it. And the same thing over here, you can see the tailor chalk mark. This is my wrong side. Okay, now I want the right side. So you have this as my right side and this is my right side, okay? So now what happens? You can't sew like this, okay? That's not the right way to do it, okay? You can never sew as it is, like, you'll say, okay, I'll sew a straight line. That doesn't work. So what you need to do is you go and you use the other side, okay? So the other side is, see, you have the same direction. This is not what we want. We want it in the opposite direction, okay? So it has to be like this. Okay, so it has to be in opposite direction, not the same way. So once you do it like that, you leave 0.5 edge on that side and you leave 0.5 corner from here. So I'm going to pin this up and I'll show you why I did like that. Okay, so I'm just going to pin it. And once I pin it, so you'll see this edge coming out like that. Okay, so there's no two layers over here. And the same thing over here also, your triangle is coming out. And once I'll finish sewing, I'll tell you the reason why we did like that. Okay, then you can go on your machine and just do your 1/8 or a 1/4 inch sewing. I'm removing my pin. You can leave the pins on if you are uncomfortable. And then you have to do your back stitch. After your back stitch, keep on going. Again, finish with your back stitch. That way your bias piping is much more strongly finished at the ends. Cut off the edge. Now, if you'll see how my edge, this one is straight. Okay, so I'm going to trim this off, what I don't need. So the best way to trim is you flatten your seam from inside over here. Just flatten it and trim off whatever you're seeing on the good edge. So once this is done, so now you'll see you get a straight line going like that. Okay, so this is when you don't want to waste too much fabric, you can keep on having seams going like that and have it continuously, a bias piping going like that whenever you have to sew in a lot of garments, or just like how I said, outside a blanket, that you can do. So once this is done, now how do we sew a bias piping? Mostly bias piping is used for a curve, but right now for today, I'm just going to show you how you can just do it on a straight edge and you can finish it in two ways. One way is, now you know this is the right side, okay? Now this is the right side of a fabric. Now, if I want to do a piping, which has got an edge sewing, okay, this has got an edge sewing, okay. So I want the edge to really look nice. So I'm going to start from the wrong side. How do I do that? This is my wrong side. I will put my right side facing right. Okay, so see, this is your wrong side. So you'll be putting, because you want it to go like this, so you'll be putting your right side facing the wrong side. And then you can go on the machine and do a 1/4 inch sewing. To finish, stitch again. Take it off. You have extra binding going on. It's called binding, also you can call it piping. Okay, so once you are done, now I have a 1/4 inch. I want to make it thinner because I want the piping to really look very delicate. So I'm going to trim it off. Trimming off is like taking out 1/8 of an inch. You're going a little bit closer to your actual sewing. The thinner the piping, the beautiful it looks. Okay, so once you are done that, I like to iron it. Okay, right now I'm just flattening it with my nails. So once you've finished flattening the seam, you can fold it. So this is your right side, okay? So now I'm going to fold it. I'm going to double fold it. So my double folding will be falling on my stitching line. That's what I actually wanted. So I'm folding it and I'm matching it. You can go a little bit out of your the stitching line also, or you can go on top of it. But when you'll be doing your final sewing, you don't want to see the first line, the first stitching line. So after you finish pinning up like that, so this will be your wrong side. Okay, so you'll have same width. And now you can go on the machine and start off sewing. When I'm going to sew it, I'm just going to do top stitching. The top stitching is going to come right at the edge. Okay, so I wanted to do it right where I fold it inside, which you'll be able to see now when I'll start sewing. You can start off with it. And now I'm sewing exactly at the edge. Let me do a little bit and then I'll show. Okay, so you can see my stitch happening over there. That's right at the edge. So this is my sample, which I've already done. Okay, so this is the way you will have your edge stitching going throughout. Okay, so this is what you will get with your edge sewing. Now I'm going to show you another way. The way is this is my good side, and I'm going to use the same bias piping which I've already sewn it. So I have extra now, I can sew it. But just remember, this is your right side. Now this again, it should be your right side. Okay, in that you were putting the wrong side with the right side of the piping, and over here it's the right side of the fabric as well as the right side of the piping. So always with the piping, start a little bit further on. Okay, so in this one, I'm going to sew again the same way. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch sewing. Just 1 to back stitch. When you have a triangle going like that, don't cut it off. Okay, first fold it and then cut off extra. But this was a straight edge, that's why I just cut it like that from here. So in this one, what you do is, this we'll be finishing it with the hand sewing. So we'll be hemming it. If you don't want the stitch to look, when you don't want the stitch to be shown like that, you can just do a hemming with the bias piping. So this will be a hand stitched, how to finish it. And generally we do it for the necklines when we don't want any sewing to be seen. So in this one, again, you can iron it, okay, flatten it nicely the seam. Once you do that, then you fold it, okay. And now folding again is going to match with your first stitching line. Just pin it up over here. Pinning up saves you so much time that otherwise you keep on folding it and sometimes the width varies. So fold it like that. Okay. I'm just going to pin up and show you how you can now do your hemming. Now for the hemming, I like taking just a single thread because neckline doesn't get stretched or the threads don't break off. So I've already threaded my needle. Take a nice long and thin needle. And whenever you are starting off your hemming, it's a good idea to hide your knot inside the fold. So I do it like that. So you can trim till the edge now that you've folded it. Now I'll hide so you will be doing a slip stitch. Okay. You can do a slip stitch or you can do your regular hemming. So now for the slip stitch, I'll be using not the fabric to lift up, I'll be using the first sewing stitches. So what will happen, my thread won't be seen anywhere on the actual fabric. So I'll be just grabbing one single stitch and passing my needle through it. When I've done like that, now in the slip stitch, you go in, your needle will travel inside in the same spot where your thread had come out from on the bias piping. You just travel inside, take it out a little bit from at a distance. And again, you pick up your stitching thread, just one thread, one stitch, okay? You pass your needle from there spot. And again, you push your needle inside the fabric, and that's the way you keep on doing it. So what happens, you don't get any stitches over here on the right side, neither on the piping and neither on the actual fabric. So I'll show you how the finished thing will look like. Okay, so this is my actual side, and now this is, in the beginning I have done a visible hemming. I know the thread is really matching. It's good. It's not showing much, but that's my visible hemming. But I always like doing invisible. That is my slip stitch. You can see my thread is hidden inside the fabric, so you don't get to see it. So what I've done is I've actually just picked up my actual stitch and I have done my hemming. So you have the bias piping to be, you can use it in two ways, either with the hand sewing, first the machine sewing and then a hand sewing. And for this one, you've used your machine sewing throughout. Okay, this also finishing looks nice. So on the wrong side, you have your stitch on the actual fabric. That's it for today's tutorials. Thank you.